Okay, so in our last video, we were looking at a visualization where the circles were kind of like pulsating to each beat. And so what we want to do is we want to continue along those same lines. But I would like to go back and make a quick change that I kind of thought that I did in a previous video, and I kind of said, hey, we'll get to it in the next video, and we never got back to it. And so that's what I would like to do. Okay, so this is our code from last video. We had our visualizations, and this is basically that code right there. Now, one thing that we did not do was this collision. Okay, so we said that we were going to get to the bottom of using rows and columns. So this first array refers to the rows or the arrays that we have within this 2D array. And this C refers to the indexes within each of those arrays. Okay, so we would have array 1 at index 0 would equal to some value, or array 2 at index 1 would equal to some value. Now, this is the trick right here, okay? So if we're thinking in terms of X and Y, we have to think about it critically and say, well, what really is referring to the row value and what is referring to the column? Because if we're thinking about it, a row is something that goes from left to right, right? And so that would be something like an X, which goes from left to right. And then the column would be something that goes, up and down, right? But it's actually different, okay? So if we think about it, rows stacked on rows, as we go down in the rows, we're actually increasing in the Y coordinate. And if we go across on the columns, we're actually increasing on the X coordinate. And so the issue was not something down here. I think I went ahead and changed column and row, not ideal. What we really wanted was we wanted column here, not big C, C and C, and this was going to be R and R. And these were R and C, just like we originally thought. Okay, and so now this fill rect right here, it's the same business. Okay, so we have this should be a C and then an R. Okay, C and then an R and a C and an R. Okay, so that should clear up what we had going on there. And so now it kind of makes sense. I changed all of them except this one right here. So we have an R and a C. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save that and run it. And so should have a lot of tom-toms playing. Tom-toms. I think they're just called toms, but for some reason I want to add an extra tom to it, so tom-toms. And now we see that we get it's working correctly. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue on with our visualization code. Okay, and so what we want to do here is we want to potentially add a UI element that allows us to select what kind of visual we want. Okay, and so what we're going to do is we are going to add a second visualization adjuster. Okay, so an adjuster to this. And we're going to make some changes. So first of all, we're going to change what this looks like. So if you see right here, we get Let me go ahead and just refresh that real quick. We get this over here, and it's kind of like not centered, and it can be basically this can be adjusted over to the left a little bit, and we can put a nice little box around it to make it seem like a single element instead of just like a bunch of little stuff on the screen. And so that's what we're going to do right here before we get into our second visualization. And so that's going to be under draw other UI. Okay, so this function right here, we're just going to draw a rect real quick. We're going to say ctx.fill.rect, and I want to draw one from 10 to 480 to 20 and 100. Okay, I'm just really adjusting it over to the left a lot by, you know, if we're starting things at 50, I'm adjusting it 40 pixels over. And I want to adjust a lot of this stuff too. So instead of 50 here, we're going to say 20, 20. This is going to be 25 instead of 55. And this is going to be 180. Okay, and then this is going to be 185, 90, and this is going to be 2060. Notice that I did not change anything about the Y values. The Y values seem to be fine. And then here we have 180, and here we have 220. Okay, I just want to go ahead and test that to make sure it looks nice. And you know, this looks better than it was before. Okay, if we wanted to get fancy, we could probably create a rectangle that had a filled-in value behind this, and you know, instead of having a gray background, we could have a little bit, you know, different color. But that's something that you can add in the future. Okay, so what we want to do, this adjusts our BPM, and what we want to do is have another adjuster that, so we'll just call this a visual adjuster. All right, and you know that we have a lot. Basically, we're going to have the same elements. Okay, so in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy all this code right here. And down here, we're going to just change some values and change some of these strings to reflect what we're doing right here. So here, instead of 10, we're going to go 250, 480. All that looks good. This is going to be 260, and instead of just BPM, this is going to be adjust visuals. Okay, and so here we got a 260. So here we have a rect, so that's 260, and this is going to be 420 right here. And we have a red, this is going to be 265, and this is going to be 425, and this is going to be okay, so what we want here, instead of this right here, okay, we want basically it to say what current visual they're on. Okay, so here we're gonna have some if statements. So here we're gonna have an if current viz is equal to 1. Okay, and so here, what we're going to do in here is just write out what it is. So here we're going to say CTX font, and then this is going to be equal to a 25 pixel RL. ctx.fillText. And what we're going to say here is stationary, and then 305, 540, and then here, and we're going to say stationary circles, and I'm actually going to add another space to the front just to kind of center it a little bit. Instead of 540, we're going to say 560. And basically, we want this same stuff in here. And so this is going to be moving circles. And yeah, all of that looks great. And the last thing we want to do is change these if statements. Remember, these are what is, adjusting the value here. So we have this value that we haven't defined yet called current viz. And so we want this is our collision code. And so what we're going to do here is instead of 20, this is going to take, say, 260. And this is going to be 300. 520, 560, and this is going to be 420 and 460. And then we don't need this. We're going to say, so this is the minus sign, okay? So here we're going to say current viz minus minus. Going to get rid of that. And then this is going to be current viz plus plus. Okay, and then here we're going to have two other if statements. Okay, we're going to say if current viz is less than 1, we're going to set current viz equal to 1. So they can never go below the minimum value for current viz. And so the same thing here, we're going to say is greater than 2, since once we have 2 in there, that will be our maximum value for current viz. We're going to do the same thing. Okay, and so let's go ahead and define this and run this just to make sure that it's working. So I'm going to go ahead and add set that equal to 1, and I want to run this. So we have this adjust visuals. Okay, this seems to work. This is huge. I think we need to go back and look at that. So it should be 25 pixel. Let's see if it actually is. 25px Arial. This right here. Okay, so this should actually be a 20-point font right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and take this font up here. And instead of 50, we're going to say 20. We're going to save that, run it, and looks good. Okay, so here we can make it we can adjust it to the visual that we want, and it looks fine. Okay, and let's just make sure that this still works. That still works. And so all we're really wanting is for moving circles to work. And right now, it shouldn't be doing anything, okay? In fact, the next go around, it shouldn't do anything. Oh wait, it still should play those because we haven't actually implemented that yet. Okay, and so what we want to do now is we actually want to implement that. So, what we want to do is instead of, this is where we're pushing our visualization. Right here. Okay? And this is our visualization. So usually it's on 1, but since we are able to just change it, we're going to just say, we're going to push whatever the current visualization is set to. Okay? And so at that point, you know, that does that. And then what we're going to do is, I think we're going to go ahead and right here. So I'm just going to copy that code right there. Now we have a new type. It is type 2. It is moving circles. And so for moving circles, we'll have a CTX arc and then the XY radius 2. That looks good. That looks good. And then instead of this decrement value, we don't want our circle to get smaller. We might. You can leave that in there just in case that's what you want. What we want is actually to move the X and the Y. So what we're going to say is we're going to say visuals at I, we're getting that object, and so the X is going to be equal to, and what we want is we want it to kind of go like in a circle. Okay, we kind of want it to spiral out a little bit, and so that's an interesting mathematical concept. And if you are in, I think it's pre-cal, you might, or maybe it's just geometry. You might be familiar with the concept of the unit circle, and to find any X and Y, okay, to find any X and Y along the unit circle. So if we were to find this point right here, well, what would the X be? X would be cosine of some theta, okay? And then what would Y be? Y would be equal to the sine of theta, okay? And so theta would be the actual degree here, okay? And so for here, we can kind of like say that that's 45 degrees. And so what if we wanted to see the X and Y of this point? Okay, well, it would be some magnitude over this, right? And so it would just be whatever this was multiplied to get to this magnitude. How many unit circles more is that going to be? And so then you would just say times the magnitude, and that would give you that point right there. Okay, so that's super important for a lot of game math, especially 2D game math, is the idea of the unit circle. Okay, and so we're not going to get too caught up into that, but what I did want you to know was that we're just going to be using that idea in this math. Okay, so we're going to say math.floor, and we're going to say math.cosine, and then we're going to say visuals at I dot rotation. And I may not have rotation already defined, but it is something that I will be defining. So in here, we're multiplying our rotation by 30. And so this is that magnitude I was talking about. So if we just did it by 1, it would change it very, very slightly. You wouldn't even really be able to perceive it. Maybe not. 1 pixel, you would see like a little shape to the circle. But 30, it actually moves that circle out, and so it does. It moves that circle 30, units out, a magnitude of 30 from what that X and Y would be using the unit circle. And so that's what that value does. And here we're going to say plus visuals at I dot X. So whatever the visual of I was to begin with, that's what we're going to do. Okay. And here we're going to say y, this is going to be sine, this is going to be y. And then what we want to do is we want to say we want that rotation to change. Okay, so rotation at 0, if we go back to this, in fact, I'm just going to say new, don't save. And so the rotation is at 0 along this line right here. Okay, and then at 45, 90, whatever, what is it? So 90, 45, so 135. Okay. Then we got 180, and you get the idea. All right. So for us, we're just kind of like, at one point it will be right here, and then it'll be here and here and here. So we're not doing a smooth transition. We don't have enough frames to really provide that smooth transition that you might see, but it might give us a good enough visual. Okay. If you wanted to, you could do it by that, but you would need much more like a higher frame rate that would allow you to do that. And right now we're only working at 30 frames per second. You could definitely up the frame rate and get something going with that. Okay, and so here what we want to do is we want to increase that rotation, okay, so that it is actually affecting the location of our visual. So we're going to say visuals at I dot rotation plus equals, and then here we're going to say 360 for 360 degrees, and we're going to divide it not by 30. I don't know what I was saying like that. That's our magnitude. We're going to divide it by how many iterations we have for this animation to play. Okay, as we increase our the BPM, we have less animation frames to play with. As we decrease our BPM, we have more animation frames to play with. So we want that to, you know, be adjustable as well as they're adjusting the BPM. And so here we're going to say visuals at I dot iteration. And then what we want to do is we want to say if this is greater than or equal to 360, we're going to splice it. Okay, we're going to get rid of it, get it out of our array. Okay, so we're not quite done. I went ahead and hit save, but we have a little bit more to add to this object. And as you see, this visual is going to be the basis for all visuals, not just circles. So even though we have this property of a radius inside this visual, it does not have to use this property. Just because we have this decrement value in here doesn't mean we have to use that. And in fact, for this one, we won't use that at all. And then for this, all we're just going to do is we're going to just do this dot rotation is equal to 0. All right, and so let's look at what that does for us. Okay, so I'm just going to, so here we have stationary circles. Okay, perfect. Okay, now let's switch over. Okay, so that's the exact effect that I had envisioned, and that's what it's doing. Now, if you wanted it to decrease as it's spinning around, we could do that. Okay, in fact, I left that in there. So if we go down to our visuals, and we took out that decrement value for the radius, and so I'm just going to do the same thing. So it's kind of cool. Maybe if you wanted to, you could make these so they still spin, but they might bounce off walls. The only issue that you have there is the amount of animation frames. If you want them to be working with just that amount of time that you have for those notes to be played, for instance, matching your BPM, then that's going to be very hard. So as you see this, when we get really fast, so it gets kind of crazy, okay? But you know, there's a lot you can do over here, and let me go ahead and reset that. There's a lot you can do over there, and so what I would like you to do is add 2 more visuals to the right hand side, and then make them so that they're adjustable right here. So if I adjust your visuals, it goes from stationary circles to moving circles to your personal visual 1, and then your personal visual 2. One visual that's really common for music players is the bar. Okay, so you have a bar that kind of goes up and down. Okay, and so that's something you could do. You could do sprites that kind of get bigger and smaller, or that run from one side of the screen to the other as the notes are playing. Okay, so, or a bird that kind of starts here and the sprites play until it gets here. That's actually, you know, using our game programming knowledge, that would be fairly trivial to do, but it might create a pretty cool effect. So as that's playing, or maybe an actual drum that you know, gets played as these are playing. So there's a guy back here, and he hits each piece of the drum, and that plays that piece. Okay, I think that would be super cool. It could even be a stick man with a stick drum set, and you know, it would show him hitting each one of those things. And so I think that might be something that I would like to work on. But let's see here. I think that's all we have for this video. Now, at this point, you should have been doing the side exercises, and you know, at this point you may have different sounds in here, and I really hope you do. You may have a smaller grid. You may have a grid that has a larger squares. Okay. You may have different adjusters down here. Maybe you have a third adjuster, and that this was one of the assignments. Maybe you have a third adjuster that adjusts the color frequency. Okay, so maybe you could say adjust the randomize only the red, green, or blue. Okay, and so there's a lot that you can do down here, and a lot you can do over here, and a lot you can do right here. So this is by no means the end to this project. I would say that at this point we have some basic functionality that will allow you to move on to a fuller product. Okay, so if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and like the video. Maybe hit subscribe if you haven't. if you're one of my students, you probably should have already subscribed anyways. But you know, I think that's where we're at with this video. I think this is the end to this series, and unless I can think of something else that we need to add later on, then you might see a video pop up at the end of this series. Maybe if I get my little drummer going, and he actually, you know, is animated towards the BPM plus the different instruments that he's playing. I think that would be really cool to see. Yeah, I think we're done with this video. So I'm looking forward to seeing you with our next project. If you haven't check out the Street Fighter 2 tutorial, you know, I hope you have a good day.